Hi, my name is Sam Church. I'm a second-year student at the University of Kansas in the Interior Architecture program, and this is my design development presentation for Foster Adopts Connect's new location in Kansas City. So to start off, I'd like to introduce you to Simone Douglas. She's a fairly typical example of a Kansas City foster youth. She's just turned 18, which means she's aged out of the system. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk you through how she gets involved with Foster Adopt Connect and explain to you how she becomes part of this continuous feedback loop that I've designed. So a little bit about our client. Our client is Foster Adopt Connect. They are a nonprofit based in Missouri and Kansas that focuses on helping foster youth, whether they are currently in the system or have recently aged out. We did a site visit to their Missouri headquarters and learned a little bit about their office culture. They are very team-based. As you can see, they like to have fun, but they do a lot of interdepartment work. They do a lot of communication between departments, so they're very team-based office, and their employees are very passionate about what they do. So I think it's important to provide them with a space that they can be passionate about as well. So some preliminary research that we began with was just beginning to understand the site, which is located 229 South 8th Street in Strawberry Hill. Our studio has done work previously in the Strawberry Hill neighborhood, so we're familiar with the community's needs and how we can begin to sort of mesh together the community's needs and Foster Adopt Connect's needs. The building itself that we're working with is an old school building. It's fairly longitudinal in shape as it was designed for education purposes. So we're talking long corridors and a classroom setup. And then the building is located in a primarily residential neighborhood. Within this radius, there are only 3 buildings that aren't houses. So we want to focus on really connecting the new site, or excuse me, the new location with the community. So I split the program we were given into 3 categories: drop-in, office, and foster youth support. And you can kind of begin to see quite a bit of overlap here that will be centralized, relatively speaking. So some program requirements from the client were that each department have their own office space that they can work in. They wanted a shelter for homeless foster youth that can house around 10 people per night. They included studio apartments in their program. These will be used by foster youth who are older and are ready to begin renting an apartment of their own. And then the biggest request from current employees at the Missouri headquarters was more storage. So based on this preliminary research that we did, I came up with 3 goals that I felt really addressed the needs of the client, the community, and the users. So for the client, I think it's important to reverse the negative stigma that seems to revolve around homelessness and being a foster youth. I think that that's something that Foster Adopt Connect can really start to address in a meaningful manner. For the community, I think it's important that trust really be established between Strawberry Hill and Foster Adopt Connect so that they can begin to work as a team to help each other rather than operate as individual entities. And for the users, I think it's important that the foster youth who utilize the space begin to begin to build a network that alleviates this isolation and loneliness that can come with being a foster youth or homeless. So some of the research that we dove into, that I dove into before we really began the design process, mine was focused very heavily around homelessness and how self-esteem impacts it. And what I found was these 2 survey-based research papers by Dr. Sean Kidd that started to pull out some of the things that really affect the self-esteem of homeless youth. And the top 4 are listed here. Those are privacy, autonomy, sense of control, and perceived stigma. Now, these first 3, privacy, autonomy, and sense of control are things that we can really begin to design for and design into the built environment in a way that can eventually, hopefully, begin to influence this perceived stigma in a positive manner. So based on this preliminary research, I came up with this concept of reframing perspectives that will be ultimately achieved through these 3 tiers that I have here. That will be the high-end treatment of guests, so making sure that they are valued and there's emphasis placed on their value within the space. The second tier is unexpected design choices. So I'm going to use those to begin to preempt the assumptions that are typically made about foster youth and the homeless. And then the use of an adaptive environment to respond quickly to the needs of the users that are going to be a largely unpredictable population. So diving right into the design side of things, you can see that the drop-in shelter is placed front and center, right next to the main entry here. That's because I want to put an emphasis on the priority of the shelter and how their number one priority is the foster youth. So placing the shelter in the front where you can really see that the foster youth are being served, I think is important. I also think that transparency is going to be very valuable to the community. So having the shelter front shows that Foster Adopt Connect isn't necessarily trying to hide anything, and they're not ashamed of helping these foster youth. And going off of that, just having a sense of pride in what they're doing is important. And I think having the shelter in front is a great way to do this. You can also start to see that these spaces with similar functions are stacking. So I've got the office spaces located towards the east end of the building, and on the west front, or the west end, which is where the front entrance is, I have more of these drop-in spaces that are going to be more uh, utilized by the foster youth. And then we have the apartments on the 3rd floor for privacy purposes. So we designed one floor. I designed the 1st floor because I felt it was most relevant to my concept. So as Simone enters this space, she may interact with the receptionist in the lobby, and then start to sort of interact with either people her own age in the drop-in shelter, or she might go into the office space to receive resources from the Community Connections Project. So I have these more after hours access spaces located towards the main entry. That's to ease navigation during these times, and also to allow the office spaces to be sectioned off from the more public area of the building. That's to protect potentially sensitive documents that may be stored in the office space. So my furnishing choices were based largely around flexibility and adaptability. So for example, we have sit-stand desks to ease comfort of employees. We have storage that can be easily moved to allow for rearranging of the office space if it becomes necessary. And we have these chairs for comfort of employees who are going to be working in the offices during the day. I also chose these tables for spaces that may be more flex-based, as they can fold up during the day to allow for space. And they're also writable to really facilitate these team-based discussions that Foster Adopt Connect places value on. These choices are all durable. They're intended to last the lifespan of Foster Adopt Connect's occupation of the space, and they also have an emphasis on ergonomics. I'd also like to point out that these furnishings with the blue circles are going to help achieve LEED accreditation. So with the materials, the primary goal was to really use quality materials that don't sacrifice durability. So all these materials are going to be visibly high quality, but also have that element of strength that is necessary for the design of the building. So the goal is to really start to bring in that high-end experience to show them that show the people who work here that they're valued. So again, these blue borders are just to indicate that materials are going to assist in getting LEED accreditation. So as Simone enters Foster Connect, she's going to be met with this colorful reception desk that's meant to really present a friendly face to the youth who are entering. This desk is ADA height to really start to implement these universal design standards. So everybody gets the same experience. Nobody necessarily has an advantage over one another in this particular space. To the left, you can see that there is a stairwell. This will lead down to some of the more drop-in resources, including the closet, the pantry, and the health clinic. This wayfinding that I chose is based heavily around the idea that it should be universal regardless of one's barriers to communication. So colors, I feel, are a great way to allow for navigation regardless of a language barrier or visual impairment. So my donor wall is immediately visible to the right when Simone enters the main entry. I felt that it was eloquent to place the names of the donors on a clear wall to kind of place emphasis on the transparency of Foster Adopt Connect's mission, that they really are there for the foster youth and they're not trying to take advantage of anyone. And I think this particular donor wall does a good job of explaining that. So segueing back into the shelter, as you can see, there is an emphasis on privacy and autonomy. So people who use this space will definitely have a level of independence as they're capable of adjusting pretty much every part of their space that they will check into. So really just placing an emphasis on privacy, autonomy, and control within the shelter is the primary goal. So all furnishings can be stored away during the day to make the space into more of a recreation area or a sort of forum. And then I've also included this ramp entry to, again, address the needs of universal design, as well as tactile flooring to allow for independent navigation regardless of visual impairment. So these shelter units that I designed are, I named them Haven because I feel like that's an apt way to begin to explain the ultimate purpose of these pieces of furniture, which are custom designed to meet the needs of Foster Adopt Connect. They include fold-up Murphy beds and storage units for the foster youth who will be using the space. And again, this emphasis on privacy and storage and adaptability, I think, is important. So I've included curtains that can be pushed in or out to adjust to the user's preference. So the office space is something that Simone will begin to interact with more as she begins to get back onto her feet and develops some more independence. So the office will be something that she visits to maybe interact with the Community Connections project to be connected with more resources, or even possibly later as an employee, because it's very common for foster youth to come back to Foster Adopt Connect to work on something that they're passionate about. So most programs that Simone will interact with are on the first floor. That's to allow for ease of navigation for both employees and foster youth. And there's an emphasis on open plan to facilitate this team atmosphere that Foster Adopt Connect places such importance on. And that's going to be really done through the elimination of walls as barriers. So each department will have at least one wall of lockable storage, a private office, and these enclaves that can be used by teams for meeting to discuss projects and or just to take a break. My training space places emphasis on adaptability. So we have these stackable chairs that can be moved out of the way if necessary, and rolling whiteboards that can also be just rolled out of the way. all the furniture in this space can be folded up or stacked and pushed out of the way to allow for some more physical activities within the training room. And then I've included these acoustic tiles to assist with any kind of noise interference or noise irritation for the users of the space. This section here is intended to really begin to explain to you how things are stacking on top of each other in the space. So we really have things sort of clustered together. Like this is the office space. We have the more drop-in focused area. And then, of course, the apartments get their own floor for privacy purposes. My signage is focused heavily on universal design standards as well. I've included Braille to address potentially visually impaired users, high contrast as well. I've also included these icons to allow for readability regardless of language barriers. So to wrap up, I'd just like to reassert the need to start to reframe society's outlooks on foster youth and homeless. I think that Foster Adopt Connect is in a good position to really begin to place value on these people as members of society. And I think Foster Adopt Connect is going to have a really positive impact on the Strawberry Hill neighborhood and the outlying Kansas City area. I'd like to encourage you to consider my proposal because I think people like Simone will continue to benefit from Foster Adopt Connect through this design, regardless of whether or not they are homeless or still foster youth. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a great day.